Ada was born into an aristocratic family in London in 1815. To prevent her from inheriting Byron's madness, her mother forced her to study mathematics and banned poetry. At 12, she designed blueprints for a steam-powered flying horse, only to be mocked by her governess. Girls should learn embroidery. At 17, she met Charles Babbage. Arguing all night in front of the difference engine sketches, Babbage marveled, "She understands the soul of this machine better than I do." At 24, translating Menabrea's paper on the difference engine, her notes were 3 times longer than the original. Babbage joked, "The notes are the real engine." At 27, after marrying and having 3 sons, she still wrote algorithms during breastfeeding breaks. Her husband complained, "The cradle is surrounded by gears." At 30, trying to use mathematics to predict horse racing odds, she lost all her savings. When creditors came to her door, she calmly said, "At least I verified the cruelty of probability." At 33, addicted to morphine due to pain, she still proofread the Bernoulli number program, claiming, "Numbers are the only lover who never betrays me." At 35, in the advanced stage of uterine cancer, she struggled to compute the last section of loop code. On her deathbed, she said to her mother, "If there's no difference engine in heaven, I'd rather go to hell." At 36, Ada passed away and was buried beside Byron's tomb. Her Note G, later hailed as the first computer program, left no trace of the blood that once stained her drafts. Her short life wrote the earliest love letter between humans and machines. In his later years, Babbage sighed, "If she had lived 10 more years, the Industrial Revolution would have come half a century earlier." Isaac Newton was born in 1643 in Lincolnshire, England. His father died early, his mother remarried, and he was raised by his maternal grandmother, leading a lonely childhood. At 12, he entered school and became obsessed with mechanical models, often mocked as a weirdo by his classmates. At 18, he was admitted to the University of Cambridge. Due to family poverty, he worked as a servant to cover tuition fees and studied mathematics in his spare time. At 25, the moment an apple fell to the ground inspired him, and he began researching universal gravitation. At 28, he invented the reflecting telescope, which shocked the academic community, but his withdrawn personality led to conflicts with peers. At 30, he published Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, proposing the 3 laws of motion and the law of gravitation, laying the foundation for classical mechanics, yet he was accused of gravitation being witchcraft. At 35, he had a fierce dispute with Robert Hooke over academic issues and angrily burned some of his manuscripts. At 40, he suffered a mental breakdown, secluded himself at home, and became obsessed with alchemy and theology. At 50, he served as warden of the Royal Mint and severely punished counterfeiters, showing an iron fist. At 54, he became president of the Royal Society, but was mired in controversy over the priority dispute with Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz regarding the invention of calculus. At 60, he published Optics, proposing the particle theory of light, which sparked intense academic debate. In his later years, he declined a Nobel title, saying, "Truth is more precious than a title." At 84, Newton passed away. His last words were, "I am merely a child standing on the shoulders of giants." He remained unmarried throughout his life, regarded science as his companion, and left countless discoveries while also being surrounded by controversies. Edward was born into a blacksmith's family in London in 1862. He nearly died at birth due to umbilical cord entanglement. At 7, playing with iron filings in his father's workshop, he mistakenly collected broken glass as diamonds, becoming fascinated by shining substances for the first time. At 14, dropping out of school due to poverty to carry bags at the dock, a crate of telescopes he unloaded shattered. Picking up the lenses, he asked himself, "Can light kill?" At 20, accidentally entering a physics laboratory, he burned his finger while experimenting with a steam engine. Yet noticed the wound healed faster, sparking the idea of heat therapy. At 28, rejected 17 times when applying for funding, he had to build an X-ray tube from scrap iron in his attic. At 32, he took a photo of his wife's hand bones, excitedly publishing a paper only to be ridiculed by peers. "This thing can't even toast bread." At 35, his assistant knocked over film rolls. Instead of discarding them, he observed the fluorescent screen for 12 hours and discovered cathode rays. At 37, his paper on a new kind of ray was cited only twice. He mocked himself, "It seems I can only toast bread with X-rays." At 40, failing to industrialize X-ray machines due to high vacuum tube costs, he used his salary to modify waste light bulbs. At 45, excessive X-ray exposure caused his hands to fester. Public opinion attacked him for digging his own grave, and he hid in a darkroom eating cold bread. At 48, when war broke out and the military requisitioned X-rays to locate shrapnel, he refused to participate. This light should save lives, not end them. At 51, when the US mass-produced X-ray machines, he gave up his patent. "The life-saving light doesn't belong to me." At 55, awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, he stared at the trophy and said, "The one who truly deserves to be here is that unthrown-away fluorescent screen." At 60, diagnosed with leukemia, he refused X-ray treatment, Leave it for the young. At 65, in a BBC interview, he admitted, "My greatest achievement is failing 312 times and not giving up on the 313th. At 68, knighted by the Queen, he yawned during the ceremony. A medal is less useful than a vacuum pump. At 73, his last words, "Don't use x-rays, I want to leave cleanly." James Cook was born in 1728 into a farmer's family in Yorkshire, England. As a child, he helped his father carry manure, yet dreamed of chasing the horizon. James Cook was born in 1728 into a farmer's family in Yorkshire, England. As a child, he helped his father carry manure, yet dreamed of chasing the horizon. At 25, he joined the Royal Navy, and stood out by mapping the Canadian coastline with his talent for mathematics and surveying. At 33, Cook commanded the Endeavour on his first voyage to explore the South Pacific and map New Zealand. He narrowly escaped death in a storm. At 41, during his second voyage in search of the southern continent, he used sauerkraut to prevent scurvy, earning him the nickname Captain Vegetable from his crew. At 44, his third voyage to explore the Arctic shipping route was blocked by ice seas, but he insisted on recording the shape of every ice floe. At 46, a conflict broke out with indigenous people in Hawaii. He tried to negotiate but was stabbed to death. His last words were still "Don't shoot." Throughout his life, Cook sailed across 3 oceans, mapped 1/3 of the Earth's coastline, and rewrote the history of navigation. He declined a Nobel title, saying, "A map is more eternal than a medal." After his death, his crew found a line in his diary, "The unknown ocean is my only hometown." Cook's spirit of exploration inspired future generations. He measured the world with his life, leaving behind accurate maps and scientific records. His last words are remembered by later generations, "Go forward, until the end of the sea."